GEO1, the Earth's crust and interior. In the beginning. Part 1. From stardust to planets. In the beginning of the solar system, there was a cloud of dust. We think this was a cloud of dust that was formed from the supernova of a star because it contained several heavy elements such as uranium and lead that are denser and heavier than iron. We know that in stars, the densest element you can form in a star is iron. So the presence of denser stuff means that you needed a special circumstance to create those elements, and we think it was a supernova that did it. So in the aftermath of some supernova, there is a cloud of dust. And over time, this dust starts to collapse and coalesce into a sort of a more a denser configuration. And over time, it starts to form this disk. And it rotates. And over time, the denser material starts to accumulate in the middle of this disk. And at that center of the disk, eventually, the matter collapsed to the point where it generated nuclear fusion and actually formed a star. So that's what goes on in the middle of the cloud, but on the outside of this disk of dust that's circulating, over time that also coalesces into bigger and bigger pieces. Also, it collapses under gravity and starts to form bigger bodies, such as planetesimals that are shown here. This larger rock, basically. And these planetesimals themselves start to collide with each other and accumulate more and more material, such that eventually you form large bodies of rock, planets, out of the denser material. And further out in the solar system, your dust and gas accumulates into planets that are made mostly of gas. And that is the basis of the formation of the solar system. And for the purposes of this class, that is all we're going to talk about it. But if you wondered why Earth is here, well, what we know is that there was probably something here before Earth that blew up, that exploded. So maybe you didn't know, but we are all made of stardust. You may have heard people say that, and it probably is true. As for how we know that there was all this stuff up there and for the timing of when it all occurred, occasionally pieces of the material that didn't ever end up accumulated into planets land on the Earth as meteorites. And the majority of them have a composition and components of the rock that's shown here, which is called a chondrite. And we think this is basically the planetary nebula material, the stuff that the Earth and the other rocky planets are made of in bulk as rocks. And these all date to a time at about a little more than 4.5 billion years ago. And these are some of our key evidence for how the Earth formed. But we're not going to talk about that for the rest of this lecture. We're going to talk about the intro class for the class GEO1, Earth's crust and interior. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Earth and the people who study the Earth, geologists. We're going to talk about Earth's history in a very, very broad way to lead into more lectures that we'll teach later in the class that will go into this in more detail. We'll talk about the people who are going to teach this class, and we'll talk about the organization of the class, what the elements of the class are, how the class is going to be assessed. And so that's what's going to come up in the following videos.